massive layoffs that we've seen within the entire tech space. What are the implications of that? Let's find out. We've got Ramani Dathi, who is the Chief Financial Officer at Teamlease Services, with us on the show. Good morning, Ramani, and thank you so much for taking time out. I just want to start with the numbers first up, because clearly it seems like maybe the wage hikes have impacted the earnings. When do you see your margins recovering to those 3.5% levels, and what has been the impact of the associate and core employee wage inflation on your margins?
Absolutely. The wage hikes have impacted our overall margin severely, because typically we used to have annual hikes in the range of 5 to 6% year on year. But over last 2 years, we have seen that trend at 12%, the annual hikes. So coupled with that, we also made some investments internally in expanding our core teams and capabilities. Because at the beginning of the year, we thought IT will continue to give us more headcount, which is a higher margin business for us. And we increased our investments. But over the last few months and few quarters, we have seen substantial dip in IT demands and open positions. So now we are accordingly reducing our headcounts, our internal headcounts and costs. So for the next foreseeable future, we are not factoring for any increase in our core headcount, whatever revenue growth that we have ideally should flow down into the bottom. So for the next few quarters, we are projecting a consistent margin expansion on a QoQ basis.
Okay, fair enough. So you're talking about a dip in headcount, largely from the IT space. And even if we're looking at your overall headcount, it's been quite flat on a sequential basis. What is the headcount addition target for the rest of the year, and how are you looking at overall demand momentum in light of the factors that you flagged off?
Yeah. So in Q1 general staffing, we have added about 13,000 headcount, but current quarter, we have added only about 5,000 in general staffing. So clearly, we have seen the open positions coming down in few verticals, especially e-commerce and telecom. So there are few verticals where we have seen, compared to last year and last quarter, the demand has come down. However, for the next 2 quarters, we are seeing strong numbers coming from BFSI, retail and consumer verticals. So we are confident of maintaining a run rate of about 8 to 10,000 headcount addition for next 2 quarters in general staffing business. However, in IT staffing, we believe that the headcounts may remain flattish or even slightly may come down for the next 2 quarters.
Right. You know, your revenue growth rate slowed. What kind of growth rate then should one expect going from here? And are the 25 to 30% year-on-year growth assumptions realistic according to you?
Yes, yes. So the 20% revenue growth year on year is definitely realistic, because a large part of our revenue, 90% of our revenue, is contributed by general staffing. So even though IT is contracting, since 90% is from general staffing, which includes all the verticals and all industries, there we are not seeing any massive slowdown. And typically in the past, we have demonstrated growth rate, which is 4x of GDP rate. So considering that, we are still confident of maintaining upwards of 20% revenue growth.
I can't not ask you about what's happening within the tech and the IT space. You know, given that it's a leading employment generator, with the kind of drop in the growth rate of demand for tech talent one is seeing right now in the technology sector, although some of the Indian players have gone on record and saying that, you know, they're actually in a hiring mode. But, you know, specifically when it comes to the startup universe and the kind of layoffs that we've been seeing off late, how badly has hiring been impacted?
Especially last 3-4 months, the hiring is on complete freeze. So only the attrition, backfilling of attrition is happening. So that's how we maintained headcounts and revenues broadly. And as you rightly mentioned, the startup space and companies which are not cash positive on their bottom line, there we are seeing the headcount reduction happening. Otherwise, in rest of the large IT services companies, in Indian companies, at this point in time, we are not seeing any headcount reduction as such. There is a hiring freeze definitely, but reduction we are not foreseeing. In fact, our internal estimates when we are talking to the customers is that starting January, there can be a pickup in the momentum, because they're not increasing their core headcount, their permanent employee headcount. So the gap between demand and supply, they are planning to deliver using contract staffing. So that should play in our benefit.
Good morning. So I want to talk more about that because, that's the big story that's panning out globally with ramifications in India as well. So you're saying that there could be a delta and that's going to be made up by contract staffing, which is good news for staffing solution companies like Teamlease. But can you give us a sense of what's happening on ground? Campus recruitments, were they all honored? You're talking about hiring freezes, but do employers who are wanting their employees to come back to offices and not indulge in moonlighting, are they now okay if they go back to their homes? Because increments can also be impacted.
Yes. No, definitely. This year, even the annual hikes in the IT and tech industry will be much lower compared to last 2 years, because during the COVID years, the annual hikes were in the range of almost 20-25% for IT professionals. So that we are not seeing similar trend to repeat in this year. So that is for sure. And also what has happened is over last 2 years, the headcounts, the IT service companies, product companies have increased their headcounts dramatically. And now what they're trying to do is they're trying to optimize their current base. They're trying to increase the productivity of their existing employees instead of adding more people. And we are seeing this slowness, especially at mid and senior level. So maybe at fresher level, companies may are still doing some sort of hiring, but at mid and senior level, there is a complete hiring freeze. And as I mentioned earlier, at least till Jan, we are not seeing any kind of pickup in the momentum for IT and tech hiring.
Can I ask you that if we are hearing Meta laying off 11,000 people, back home, you've got companies like Byju's that are having to trim 55% of the workforce, Unacademy, the list goes on and on. We can go on, we can talk about that. But can you tell me then what is changing in January? Because we're reading all of these bad headlines in the month of November. Why in 2 months will things change?
No, okay, let me correct myself. I'm not saying everything will change from Jan. But since for last 4 or 5 months, companies are not adding any headcount at all, there can be a small delta between their demand and the supply. And that delta can play in the benefit of contract employees. I'm not talking about the fact that there'll be an increase in overall hiring for IT employees. The permanent hiring may still not improve even from Jan. But as far as contract employment is concerned, we believe that so there can be some open positions that would come to the temp staffing space.
Okay, temp staffing and contract hiring, you're saying, could pick up. So I just want to understand your outlook as well. Just one last question. Do you think that, it would be fair to say that this kind of high attrition that we're seeing for IT companies back home especially is going to be the normal trend, or it will normalize now?
Surprisingly, the attrition, even for last 2-3 months also has been at a very high level. But we also believe that it would come down because so far the attrition in IT services and product companies got absorbed by the startup space. But now even the startup companies are also getting into layoff modes and hiring freeze. So ideally the attrition levels should come down. So, but at this point in time, we are very much having a very high attrition in tech and IT.
Indeed, we are, and we're seeing that being played out across the board. Thank you so much for putting that into perspective and giving us a sense as to what these tech layoffs mean for the entire sector as a whole. So